Okay, hopefully everybody's on. We might get cracking. So welcome everybody to the ERF webinar on the EU AI Act in recruitment. My name is Mike McDonagh. I'm one of the committee members with the ERF. So thank you everybody for joining us this morning. Just a quick start off, I'd like to just give a shout out and a thank you to our sponsor today, Contracting Plus, who make these Talent Talk briefings possible for you to attend with their really generous sponsorship. So if you don't already know, Contracting Plus are key partners for many of our members involved in the contract and recruitment and sourcing. They offer really quick and compliant setup for new contractors. They provide contract training and information sessions for your teams, and they have in-depth insights and research on various sectors within the contracting industry in Ireland. So if you're working with contract talent, make sure you give Amy, Jen, or Jimmy a shout, and I'm sure most of you are familiar with those guys. So thank you very much for joining us. And obviously, as you can see, we've got three people here on the webinar helping me host today. So I just want to introduce them in turn. So first of all, we've got Mary Seery Kearney. So Mary's a practicing barrister and a specialist in employment, privacy, data protection and AI law, as well as a corporate governance and compliance. She's a former senator and has advised a wide range of employers, professional bodies and organizations, and is also a director of the HR Brief, which provides consultancy in HR, industrial relations, employment and data compliance. Jesus, Mary, I'm tired even reading this out. I don't know how you do your job. Mary, you also lecture at third level across law, business, corporate governance and data protection, and you bring the legal and regulatory perspective to our discussion today. We've got Michael Lantry here, who's a director of Gempool and the secretary of the ERF Executive Committee. He's got huge experience in the recruitment and technology sectors, working across permanent contract and RPO. And he brings the perspective of an established recruitment business adapting to the opportunities and challenges presented by AI. And then finally, last but not least, Sandra Quinn is the founder of Quinn Associates, an executive search firm specializing in senior finance and leadership appointments. A chartered accountant and executive MBA graduate, Sandra is currently implementing the RF's AI Code of Conduct and members policy within her own business. And so she's going to bring a really practical perspective and a slightly different scale of what AI compliance means for recruitment business day to day. So guys, thanks very much for joining us, and thanks to the RF for putting on this webinar. Mary, I might hand over to you to get us cracking, and you're going to go through a few slides for everybody today. Sorry, before we get going on that, though, you'll see that a poll has just been launched there. So we will ask everybody just quickly if you could jump on to answer that poll, which should be straightforward enough. We're trying to, I suppose, gauge what your level of understanding is for the EU AI Act, and hopefully, I'm absolutely certain once Mary's finished her presentation that you'll have a much better understanding. So let's see how those poll results come in. So please continue to answer the poll there as we go along this morning.
Thank you very much. And let me do, of course, this thing. Let me see. Sorry. Slideshow from start. That's better, I think. Is it? Yeah, is that for you? It works?
Yeah, we got you.
Okay, great. I'll just stop looking at myself. So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for being here. I am coming to you live from Lanzarote, and that is thanks to David Kearney, who I was tuning in this morning. So hi, Dave. I'm still here, and I'm in one piece. As is our daughter. So I can be here because he can care for everything at home. So thank you for that. So I suppose I want to run through in normal everyday language what the EU AI Act, what the implementation of that is for recruitment, for how we can assist you with the ERF, what we've already done to assist you and to support you in, but also just to kind of remove some of the fears and make this a little bit more manageable, because I always come from a perspective that AI is really beneficial. It's really helpful. It's to all of our benefit to be more efficient and to be more productive. And certainly AI does that and brings that. But what we don't want to do is have a situation where we, I suppose we're so afraid of it, we're paralyzed and we're not getting to implement it. So you have the poll there. I might get rid of the poll at some point, Anna, because it's in the middle of my screen. So I assume that all of you are just seeing it.
You can just minimize it.
Can I? If I minimize it, it doesn't do anything, does it?
No.
I don't seem to be able to minimize it. So I'm really sorry. This goes to show you can be, if I put it down there, then you all can have it wherever you want. Okay. So I suppose, I mean, what you don't want is to land yourself, your staff, your candidates, or your clients in trouble. And I'll explain to you how you can land your clients in trouble in a minute. Um, but I suppose there are when we look at these things, um, now there are two fears, in this room, in our virtual room here, there are two fears that generally I come across and I find. And they are, will AI replace me? And I suppose the short answer to that is no, AI won't replace you. AI, it will replace some mundane jobs. It will automate some things. There's certainly, we've been involved in negotiating restructurings where AI is being implemented. Uh, but that maybe just frees people up to do different aspects of their job or develop different aspects of their job. So the honest answer is that AI won't replace a really good recruiter. And it especially won't replace a recruiter who uses AI really efficiently. But what we don't want is for that recruiter to get things wrong and to make mistakes. And the second question is, am I about to get this badly wrong? And where I experience that in businesses are that there are businesses who are afraid to touch it altogether because they think, look, we use it personally, we use ChatGPT or we use whatever, but we are afraid to actually implement AI. Or is it so expensive to get the AI that we just can't afford this bespoke model and these specially written ones. And really, 18 months ago, a lot of the work that I did on implementation was where businesses were implementing one that watched they had people who came into their business, watched their workflows, watched how they did things. But in actual fact, that was so that a bespoke AI was written for their business. That isn't happening anymore. People are adapting Claude. They're getting it at that particular premium level. And other Google, Michael Lantry will talk to you about what they do and how they do it of other types. I've come across, obviously there's the Microsoft Copilot. We've looked at implementing that efficiently in businesses. So there are different models used within what is currently off the shelf and bought. And so can that go badly wrong? Yes, if you're not looking at GDPR, and yes, if you're not using it in the way that you should be using it. But that should never stop you. So if we go on to, will it get you into trouble? Yeah, it can potentially, but it doesn't have to. And so the big idea that I would want you to hold on to is saying that AI is not the problem here. AI is just a tool, the same way that I'm seeing you on my laptop here on the Wi-Fi. It's onto my hotspot here, but here on my hotspot, I'm using technology to reach and to be able to speak to you from the Canary Islands, and you are presumably in the main in Ireland. And so the use of technology is not the problem. How we use it and using it without checking and knowing and being literate enough to know what to ask, what to do, and how to say it, and what the answers are, the tricky answers that sometimes vendors will give. And vendors will tell you, oh, how amazing it is. Even the AI recruiter within LinkedIn and LinkedIn recruiter, how amazing all its capacity, there's loads of bells and whistles until you start having difficulties that lead you into GDPR breaches and areas like that. So let's have a look at where the law actually is right now. So some aspects of the law have been in place since February of last year. And that is a total ban on types of AI that really that get into analytics of people that are completely unknown to them. So analyzing their face, I will look to the sideways. What does that mean? What am I accessing? Am I accessing the creative part of my brain? Does that mean that I'm lying? Does that all of those sort of all of those sort of uses, they are banned. And then there are other much more that's at that high level of social media companies, the sort of profiling of people that they were doing. There are elements of that that are banned. But the one that reaches all of us, and especially us as employers, is that there is a duty to ensure AI literacy where AI is being deployed, and that is happening. So that starts very simply. We don't get, I'm sure anyone that's heard me before will be bored with this analogy, but we don't get emails from our friend, the Nigerian prince, offering us millions anymore because the AI within our email system pushes that to junk or excludes it altogether as a scam email and knows that it is. So we don't get those notifications really generally anymore. They're all filtered out at a very high level or at a level that they don't even get into our systems anymore. But there are the one that sorts you into junk mail, that sorts your emails like that. That's using AI. And you have to be literate enough to know that, God, I have to go through my junk mail. If I was expecting an email from someone new, or if you're in accounts and an email comes in from an invoicing from a business that you haven't worked with before, you need to know to be able to go to junk mail because maybe that went to junk mail. And if the company is saying, which we did send you, or they're ringing up looking for payment and saying, but we have sent you, we can show you where we sent you the email. To have the literacy to know, well, I need to check junk. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's junk. It takes human oversight to look into that junk email box and to sort it and make sure and mark something as not as junk. If it isn't, if it's from a bona fide receiver, or you might sign up to a newsletter. And I know for me, sometimes a newsletter on AI or something like that, or a new, thought leader, I will follow them and their email will go into the junk mail the first time, and I've got to mark it as not a spam and make it. So that's my AI literacy that tells me to go in. So that's one aspect of it. So as you go through, you've got to do a mapping of all of the data of all of the AI use that you have. And in all of that AI use, know, are people literate enough to know how to use this? And then you, as people who are owning a business and purchasing this, there are higher level questions that you need to know. So that literacy duty isn't a tick box exercise that everybody goes through as something and says, oh yeah, no, I've seen that, no enough now. That is not enough. You have to actually be able to engage it, know its pitfalls, and have a risk assessment within your business to know what can go wrong, how do we mitigate it, what sort of feedback and learning loop goes on here that we are literate enough to know as this thing develops. Because even Perplexity, Claude, ChatGPT, all of those models have changed. In fact, we're using multiple different models within those systems, even in the last 12 months. And in that period of time, even they have changed considerably, and you have to be on at all times on top of, do their privacy change, settings change. And Claude AI do a podcast. All of them have podcasts, but there's a Claude AI daily podcast that's worth tuning into and following. It only lasts a couple of minutes, but it's worth tuning into just to stay on top of that. Okay, so since August of last year, there were rules for the big AI creators for what they could and couldn't do, what they trained their model on, and the level of testing that they had to go into. There was the August of this year was a hard, deadline for all of us, particularly those with high risk duties. That has been pushed out now until December of next year, and the digital omnibus being passed in June and coming into effect on the 29th of June, that has brought with it these new dates, and the EU changed the Parliament voted in for these new dates. So the new date is the 2nd of December 2027. For businesses, you look at this in two ways. You'll either look at it and think, oh yeah, we don't have to think about this because it's not going to really be applied, or it's not going to really affect us until next year. That would be very, very foolish. What you do then is the better way to do this is to look at it and to say, do you know what? I now have until December next year to really make sure we have our act together. But in the meantime, there are compliance things that you've got to be adhering to, and GDPR is always going on in the background here. So it's really important that you're doing that. So that's where the law is right now. So when we talk about high risk, I suppose the question is, what does high risk mean? And what does it not mean? So what it doesn't mean is that the use of AI is banned. So you may use AI to sort, to rank, to score, to filter, to target job ads. You can use that, but, and it's a massive but, you must ensure that that risk has the responsibilities attached to it of real, meaningful human oversight. Not just that a person is ticking a box and moving on and going, oh, yeah, that's what it produced, and, we throw it out. It has to have meaningful engagement. Can the human interact with it? Is the human assessing the output of the AI and looking for patterns, looking for, is this real? Is it accurate? Is it appropriate? Is it doing it in the way that I do it? Is it looking at things like that? So is there a qualified, competent person in the loop with the skills, the cognitive skills, the development of judgment? Is there someone in the loop that has the time and the authority to override the output of the AI? So that's what having human oversight is all about. The next is transparency. Are candidates told when AI is being used and the manner in which it affects them? Are you testing it? Are you testing its output? Are you validating what it says before you rely on it and you send it out? And are you documenting this? Are you keeping records? Are you documenting how you've used it, what you've used it? Are you doing data processing impact assessment before you deploy it? As a function and as an area of your work, are you doing that? That's really important. So that's really, because real human beings are affected by the decisions here of this AI. So you have got to make sure that you're being responsible in its use. And that's what high risk means, because you are in the business of making decisions that affect real people's lives. And that's what puts this into the high risk category. So I suppose this comes down to three questions. There's practically three questions that we need to ask ourselves. And that is there anything, is anything training on the data that we put into the AI system? So if you're using a free version of Claude or a free version of ChatGPT or Perplexity or the multiplicity of them that are out there, are they training on that data? Because it comes back to the old adage, and I used to say this at the beginning of GDPR, if you're getting it for free, then, you're the one that's on the menu. You're the one, there's a price, there is always a price. These people aren't doing it for the good of their health. Mark Zuckerberg is empowered by wanting the world to be a better place, by us all being friends and in contact on Facebook, for those of us of a certain age. That isn't the case. The case here is that everything that goes into these systems is being used to train AI models that ultimately we will pay for to get greater access to, ultimately that we will be more dependent on. And because it is training, and in fact, the AI training systems are running out of data to train the AI on, and they're using AI to generate data now to train on, which in itself seems to be quite cannibalistic and leads to greater possibility of there being errors, in my view. But anyway, that's a whole other morning's work. So if you put in CVs, if you put all of the candidates' details and everything about a person into an AI tool, that tool is training on it. That tool is feeding on it and processing on it from where? Where is that tool actually operating? Is it operating in Silicon Valley? Is it? So if that's the case, the simple thing of you putting in those CVs from your desk and your laptop or your computer desktop, your desktop computer, that is being fed on from a country outside of the EU, and it engages GDPR transfer rules. And even if it's only within it for a very short period of time, it's still within it. So you've got to pull the system out and into your way of doing it, and you can only do that by paid models. So, it is potentially serving back to you what other people have put into it. And it is going to serve to others what you've put into it if you're working off a free model or you're not very careful even in the lower level paid models. So the distinction between the two, processing is fine as long as it's done safely. But if it is absorbing your information and training on it, then, and you need to go into all of the privacy settings, you need to do all of that in your business to ensure that. So free computer or free versions of the popular tools are a no-no for putting any candidate data, any of your own data, anything like that in. And this is where you've got to be really careful about the shadow use of AI. So if you have recruiters who are, by their very nature, by the nature of the job, everybody is in a race to get a candidate placed in a particular role. And the faster you are and the more efficient you are at it, the better you will be and better performer you will be. So the temptation for people to use a form of AI either on their phones, in their private computers, outside of your system, by emailing that outside of your system, you need all of that detection in there and all that software in there to know. And you need open disclosure within your business of, if you're using any free chat GPT models, talk to us. Let's figure out a way that we can, if it's the efficiency that you need, then that's great. The free ones are good for writing, they're good for a little bit of research, they're good for prepping for meetings, saying to it, we're running an interview for, this is a set of questions maybe that would be run for an interview. For a software analyst, what should we be asking? Act as a recruiter within a business or within a next business. And if you put in the correct prompts, it'll come back with great stuff that's really helpful. Even just saying, I'm going to have a meeting with Mary Seery Kearney. What do I need to know about her? I'm in going into this meeting, and it'll pull everything there is out there on the internet. Not all of it is true, but it'll do those such things. So is it very useful? Can you use the free stuff for that? Yeah, absolutely. But that's not the issue. The issue is, what are you feeding into it and making sure that it isn't feeding off you. So you need to be at business and enterprise tiers in the use of these models, where you have full control. In the more enterprise levels, the training is absolutely switched off by default. You don't have to go in and look for it. There is a data processing agreement behind it. You're in a completely different position. So you're better to be at an enterprise level of these. And Michael will share, I think, his journey in making sure that all happened, and the sort of questions that he asked, and he has very good way of looking at it there that he'll share with you. So what you need to know is that you are documenting the evidence of your due diligence. Where your data is going, where does it rest, albeit briefly. How do you know it's going to do that? And are there any, I suppose, high risk things and over the line things, the red line or the bright line, and I will deal with those. So a lot of this we've already answered. Where does your data go? So just want to give you a quick example that probably a lot of people are doing, and you just need to be very careful about it or think about it. In Zoom, there is an AI note taker that opens up. If you're on a particular level of Zoom, it'll open up an offer to take notes. It's a really efficient tool. It's really good. And it may be doing a transcript for you, and that can be very helpful. And if you're doing interviewing or whatever, everybody that's within that meeting needs to know that that's happening. It can open and offer you to do transcript while you're in Teams or you're in something else. So the people in the call need to know that it's happening. But if you have a system where it takes notes, generates transcript, You use that to efficiently pare it down to the minutes of a meeting, and then you delete what's on the note taker. It still has resided within the note taker for a short period of time. So it can be safe in how it's used, but at the same time, it's storing that transcript. If the transcript is being stored, it's storing it in its cloud, in the Zoom cloud. You don't know where that is. It may be outside of the jurisdiction. That is a GDPR transfer of data. And so even though everything is visible, it's really important that you are making everyone aware of that, and that happens. So you need to be very prescriptive in your privacy notice of how you use tools like that. So, you don't maybe expect to hear from me. You wouldn't throw away the tool. You won't stop using it, but you do need to amend your privacy notice. There are, and it can be a simple formula of words. On occasion, we use a tool to help produce minutes. It's a short period of time, and the data is transferred, and then we delete it within 15 minutes of the meeting being over. So nothing is stored on the cloud for very long. But it is a situation that arose with one client of mine recently, where I had to turn that hidden data flow, and we turned it into a disclosed, manageable data flow. And that's really the whole thing. We're not binning the tool. We're using the efficiencies of the tool, but using it in a transparent and also in a way that we know what we're doing, and we're making sure that we do. Sorry, that was question 2. Now, if we go on to question 3, so where is the red line? And there is a red line here. High risk does not mean banned, but there are tricky things that we are in orange light territory here. So if you have, for instance, the LinkedIn recruiter, you were in orange territory there. You're filtering people. You're filtering them for efficiency, but what you need to know is what am I filtering, and why am I filtering it? And that you have, and this is where you have data processing impact assessment. What is it excluding? What are the criteria? Now, a lot of you will instinctively do that. We want someone with 5 years experience. They must have X qualification. They must have, whatever on this. So they're all really important. Where we move into absolute no territory and cross that bright line or that red line is where you have emotion recognition. In recruitment, or just generally in the workplace setting, that is absolutely prohibited. Yeah, and I think I've possibly shared before of finding myself doing GDPR audits with several different companies. This happened, and they had a tool marking productivity and engagement on their Zoom meetings or Teams meetings or whatever they were using. They had a tool that deployed, and they monitored people's performance. And then this would generate a report. And at the end of a GDPR audit, I'd say, is there anything else? Any tools you're using? Anything, no. Well, we have this that monitors, the levels of engagement that people have. And I go, oh, is that okay? Absolutely not. It is now banned since last year. But prior to that, so is that still stored somewhere? If you own it prior to that, you need to delete it. You need to make sure that it's deleted. So there's no balancing exercise that can go on here. There's no justification that could go on for things like that. You can't handle it with care. You must absolutely ban its use, because it has been banned since February of last year. So that also goes for inferences. So it may be that the performance tools that I have seen that came from the States that were prior to February of last year was this level of engagement. Mary spoke for 3 minutes, Mike spoke for 10 minutes and whatever. That doesn't mean that one is a better quality than the other. It's just a larger quantity. It may be that the topic was more appropriate to Mike than it is to Mary. So naturally, Mike, being the subject matter expert, was going to speak on that. So that's where these tools ran into really big problems of they were giving codes and attributing scores to people that weren't based on real life experience. But yet this was coming up in performance appraisals. So anything like that, anything that infers, anything that checks background characteristics, you are not allowed to use it. So if a shiny new system offers you any of those kind of features, you need to walk away because it's selling you non-compliance and it's selling you a massive fine in the future. So if we look at the three things, is it training on our data? Where's our data going? And that is important. And okay. So when you look at, your ranking machine, and this is where I would say to you, there's a few things here you need to think about. First of all, employment equality law is also engaged. Do you have service agreements with your clients? Your clients probably, as part of those service agreements, have attached in a data processing a data processing agreement with you, and a DPA. Sorry, I have to remember what the actual words are. So they're using a DPA, or they've applied a DPA. That puts the liability within that processing on you. So if you have a tool that's screening out candidates and selecting candidates without that official high-level human being oversight, and if it is involved in bias, you're in breach of that processing agreement. So while the case to the WRC might go against your client because Mary didn't get to the final stage of the interview, and it is Dell Computers that was making that decision, and the decision on, and you might have a line in your SLA that says ultimately who is chosen and who's picked for the final, lineup or the second line interviews is a matter for the client. And I have gone in and successfully defended agencies on that basis in the WRC for employment equality claims. But the client can then turn around and say, well, now, hold on a minute. It was your processing tool that ranked everyone for us and gave us those final. It was your processing tool. Where is your disclosure on your AI? And how are you? So the way you processed it was wrong. So you may have, and I have done a lot of work over the last few years making sure that those indemnity clauses that clients put in to make sure that if their temporary agency worker, if they sack their temporary agency worker, and the agency worker comes after them, that the agency, have indemnified them against any losses. So I work very hard to keep them out of SLAs and T's and C's with clients over the last number of years with my clients. But the problem is, now that AI has crept into it, you are data processing to arrive at your shortlist. And if you are data processing to arrive at your shortlist, then you may be in breach of that data processing agreement, and they'll catch you on that even if you've no indemnity. So you need to be very careful about that and that privacy notice and how that works. So you need to make sure that there is human, or that it is lawful, that it is fair, that it is transparent, that there is meaningful oversight. And if you're profiling, you're influencing hiring decisions. So you need to have a data processing impact assessment done. And sorry, just I'm mindful of time. So how do you know it's not biased? You need to be running a pilot. You need to be making sure that you are not biased, that your system is not. So, there is the famous Amazon experience where they did a recruitment training and selection process based on historical candidates over the previous 15 years, except that in that period, it was men that were successfully, and was men that were attracted to the education in that area much more than women. So the tool decided that women were eliminated from the start because no women were educated at that level. So women were excluded, and their whole recruitment tool was completely abandoned because it was showing such bias. There were a number of live cases across both the EU and America at the moment that are looking at this and scanning for this all the time. So you need to be very careful that you're not biased. So how do you do that? You've got to test it. You've got to look at, is it screening out people with protected characteristics? That's gender, sexual identity, it's all of the 9 protected categories, disability. Is it screening out people, a particular characteristic? Is it screening that out? Are there individual discrepancies? You know, people of color, race, people with particular surnames, religion, are things like that happening? So you need to be looking for, well, what's the rate of the database of people that this throws up for long listing? What proportion of them are into each category? And you are allowed to use profiling information to ensure that your bias isn't biased. And where it is, you've got to record it, change it, put in your mitigation factors, and keep that up and keep doing that. Okay, you can't rely on the AI tool did it. It's not a defense. It won't work. There will be no accountability. With you will be accountable. You can't say you choose it, you deploy it, you own it, and you need to be very careful. And in this, I suppose I would say to you, and this is a particular passion of mine, if you are using the tool and you are not bringing in a younger generation of apprentice recruiters, if you don't have people that are in training as recruiters, because the tool is doing the work that they once would have done. If you're doing that, then you're not developing that cognitive development and cognitive judgment skills within your business. And what will happen is you won't have people who are able to discern whether the AI tool is working properly or not, or whether it's biased or not, because you won't have people in the next generation of recruiters within your business that have that ability to make that judgment, because they have the life skills and experience that you have acquired along the way before these AI tools. So that cognitive development and training that next generation, you know, you can get them involved in the pilots, get them involved in thinking that way so that you're training them in how you think. And that's where you need apprentices coming up who are alive to this, and also making sure that you have what is the next one, which is the human value. If we all automate, if we all use LinkedIn Recruiter, if we all use all of these magic fabulous tools, then we're all serving the same soup. We're all going to become generic. Well, and if clients see that generic, I mean, I can spot an AI document a mile off. If clients can see that, then they'll say, well, what am I? Obviously, I can just pay for this in-house and I can just do this. So what you're doing is you're augmenting your people. You're letting the AI serve your people. You're not automating your people away. And that's really, really, really important. We don't want to all, you know, what is the special sauce that makes your business your business? That special sauce is really important. So prepare, don't panic. We've done an ERF code of conduct. We've given you a model policy. There is an implementation booklet. All of that is there to help you and to make sure that you keep a human at every basis of the decision. So I'm going to hand back to you guys now. I think that's the end of me. And I will stop sharing and it's over to you guys.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mary. That was, well, yeah, just so much information there, but really, really helpful. Just to remind everybody, we've got a Q&A section. If you can't see it, it's probably under the three dots where it says more at the bottom of the screen for you. If you have any questions for Mary or the rest of the panel, please fire them in there. And also just to remind you as well, under more, you might be able to find the polls and quizzes. So just looking at the results there from the poll around how would you rate your understanding of your organization's obligations under the EU AI Act. So the vast majority is somewhere in the middle. You know, we understand the basics, but need more practical guidance, which I think we've just been given a tour de force on there. But I'm hoping this session tells me whether I should be worried. So sounds like you probably should be, really, but like, you know, there's lots to be done and there's lots of ways that we can help you through the ERF as well. There is a second question in the poll. Some of you are already taking it, but if you could have a look at that as well now, please. So have you or your business taken any steps to manage the risks of AI in your recruitment process? So that would be great if you could just fire in any thoughts there. So whilst you're doing that, I might just hand over to Michael Lantry. I know Mary referenced there. Michael and Gempool and his team have done a lot of work in this area, and maybe any reflections from what Mary's just said there, Michael.
Yeah, well, it's encouraging to see that in that second question, there's a lot of people who've done stuff, created guardrails, but there's clearly a lot of work to be done. And I'd apply that to Gempool as well. We still need to do more. One thing for us that was important was looking at how we create a kind of cohesive understanding and of what we can and can't do as a business, not just individually on our desks. Because what has probably happened in most businesses is people have just started diving in and using these tools and trying to, um, uh, you know, speed up how they write a job spec or whatever it is that they're doing. But there needs to be a kind of cohesive approach. And for ourselves, we have run training workshops internally. So, for example, we did a series of 3 training workshops where the other director, Cathal, led those and facilitated them and basically said, okay, in this scenario, is this okay to use AI? In this scenario, is okay to use AI? And it wasn't just from a legal standpoint, and we've talked a lot about that, but it's also kind of from, well, is it appropriate for the candidate experience? Is it appropriate for the client? Is it aligned with your principles as a company? And what's the kind of right thing to be doing in terms of delivering our service as recruiters? So, that was really useful, and it kind of allowed us to establish some principles around accountability, about fair use of AI internally. This is all very much just internal. One thing we have yet to do is update our policy statement to really call out some of the stuff that Mary has highlighted there. So that's an action we'll be taking, and building out a more comprehensive kind of risk assessment, because we have done that, but not extensively. The other comment I'd make is we're currently in the process of moving system. We're with Vincere and we're moving away to a new system, and we're demoing at the moment a lot. And there's some really cool AI features, and this has allowed me to think about some of the questions we now need to be asking around those features and how they work and how we would use them internally as a business. So, yeah, I mean, happy to dive into any of that stuff, Mike. But thanks,
Yeah.
Mary, for all that insight as well.
Sorry, I'm gonna riff a little bit here because you make a really good point. So you brought up something there around systems and changes and the features that are available, and obviously a lot of these businesses that will offer recruitment systems are based in the UK. Is there something for us to automatically be sort of like thinking about there, Mary, around differences between, say, UK approach to this stuff and obviously us in the EU? Is there something there just on a very specific point about AI in recruitment technology that we need to think about? You're on mute there, Mary.
Sorry.
You all right?
Uh, no, there aren't huge differences because the UK, the IOC in the UK is really, really good. In fact, it's my go-to place, along with obviously the Irish Data Commission. But they have fantastic work. They have fantastic guidelines, fantastic, really helpful stuff there that you can use. So they tend to be on a par. We obviously they are keeping to EU standards all the time. So if they're compliant with an UK standard, then they will invariably be in EU compliant. However, you've got to check that, and it depends from one vendor to another. And that's where your own literacy to know what's the difference between vendors. I see there, for instance, in the chat, there's a question on the use of Copilot in an organization from a GDPR perspective. Well, that depends on what level you're paying for the Copilot, what
Yeah.
deploy. It's like anything. I can have GDPR compliant Outlook, but if I send an email to the wrong mic, I have broken GDPR. So it depends. Yes, technically, yes, of course you can use it on all your CVs. Of course you can. But is it compliant? Well, it's in actually how you're using it and the safeguards you put in. And they're at the settings level that Michael has shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to build on that, Mike, Mary mentioned about how we're kind of assessing that, right? So we use Google Workspace for our emails, for our video calls, for our Google Drive. And so as part of that kind of business standard account that we have, we fall under the enterprise privacy terms under Google, which dictates that when we use Gemini, when we use Gems, when we use the chat feature of Gemini, when we use it inside Drive or Gmail or any of those things, it's a walled garden and there's no training on that data. I also reached out to Google through their customer service and had them confirm it with me as well. So, and obviously have the privacy terms. So took those steps to try to confirm it from different angles, and make sure that that was the case, because we use custom gems extensively. And in there, we would be, looking at putting CVs in and getting some long listing done with that. And we did the same with Vincere that we use at the moment to confirm that our data is being stored inside the EU, and which cloud service they're using. So easy enough steps to take for anybody just to capture that.
Yeah, it's almost just knowing the questions to ask, isn't it, really? But you've got to ask them. And just finally,
just before we bring in Sandra, can I just, because Michael has said something really important there about long listing.
Yeah.
And it touches on that second question that's in the Q&A. Long listing is dependent on the criteria that you put in, who is drawn out of it. The shortlist, and that can be done by the AI, but you've got to risk assess what is the criteria that you're putting in to bring out that initial long list. But the shortlist has to be done by a human being. It has to be using judgment. It has to be following through on all of those. So long listing, AI assisted, shortlisting, human people. And maybe that's where that question from Tiernan of where preparatory tasks and evaluating candidates, that's where it crosses that line.
Yeah. Brilliant. Just to Michael again before I come to you, Sandra. I'm not going to assume everybody knows all the terms here, because obviously we've got variant. But when you talked about walled gardens, there, just talk us through what you mean by that, and again, how do we know that they're actually in place and they're safe?
Well, it means that the Gemini LLM is not training on our data, and there's no human inside Google looking at our chats or our data. So that's essentially what it means, is that the data is secured within the Gempool ecosystem, I guess. And we use Google Meet, and we do use the transcription tool. And I did kind of try to uncover there, because there is a minute when you end a Google Meet, and then you see the transcription notes in your Google Drive meetings folder. And what's happening there, where's the data being processed and then analyzed? And it is, Google, for example, use transport encryption. I'm not technical, I don't know the technical terms, but they use it's fully encrypted and then immediately deleted once that's processed. But there is a moment there, so that needs to be added to our privacy statement, and that's an action I need to take, because we haven't actually put that in there. So we need to put that in there. So those are the little kind of things that we need to just tweak for our business anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Sandra. You're in a slightly different kind of context, working for yourself, sole trader. But you're obviously trying to grapple with all of this as well. What's your thoughts on what Mary and Michael have said?
I think the fact that I'm on my phone because my Zoom sound wouldn't work this morning proves how technically illiterate I am. So it's an absolute disaster. But no, so it is just me, and that has obviously, tech in general can be difficult thanks you don't have an IT team to go to, or you don't have a technical person to go to. I have heavily leaned on the ERF since this started. So I started with ChatGPT at the very, very start, and I developed all the time, and I learned all the time to get better and to make it more safe. So what do I use it for as a person by myself? It's sort of like another employee. I have a third screen, which is my Claude screen. One thing I've done recently is completely separated ChatGPT and Claude. I use ChatGPT for personal stuff. I use Claude for work. So Claude can be reviewed. Any AI audit that might happen, please God won't, but anything that could happen, they can come in and look at Claude, and that's all work, and that's all totally, me doing my best to keep it right. I use it for formatting, writing content, emails, agents to find market info, etc., planning, prioritizing. But as a solo person, the most important thing that I need to obviously be careful of is that I am very compliant. So I would use the ERF. The implementation booklet that Mary mentioned is excellent. It just makes you more productive, I think. Obviously, we all know that, but separating it is important. And always a human review. So when I consider it as an employee of the business, I would not let somebody do some work and put it out as the work of Sandra Quinn or Quinn Associates without checking it. So I think if we have that mentality all the time, we will double check things, we will make sure it's correct, and we will do our best to know that it's fair. In terms of being conscious of the next generation, which was mentioned as well, that's really important, because if we rely on these bots all the time, we won't have any humans to review stuff. So what I've done is I have, for future people that might come to the business, I have an AI policy and code of conduct document now, which is 11 pages long, supplemented by all of the ERF documents as well. So yeah, I think that's the most important thing, is to be aware, get other people to check things. Again, because I don't have a second person to check, you know, my policies, I often ask like a peer in the industry or something, say, look, have a look over that. And that's where I'm coming from, really.
Yeah, that's great. And I think a few of us have touched on this. You know, there's obviously this fear AI is going to take over, you know, recruiters' jobs, but we also mentioned, like, you know, there's the, you know, clients want to talk to an individual and they want that judgment piece, whether or not it's been, you know, bestowed upon us by legislation. But there's that commercial piece that we've got to make sure that we're cognizant of. This is the secret sauce, that you will offer something different to, say, I would, or Michael would, or, you know, vice versa. And
I think that's
really, really important. Yeah.
There is almost, it's going to be better for us, because I find I'm in recruitment for 15 years. I hate admin. I hate writing up stuff. I hate doing ads. I hate all of that stuff. I just want to be talking to people. And I think good recruiters are just really good talking to people and talking to clients. Clients are at a disadvantage in this too. So they don't know any of this stuff, and they are using tools themselves. They're possibly using ChatGPT. So we can help them to know what they should be doing as well. So if anything, it's going to make us more valuable and more important. And it's like anything, you know, we go to the supermarket now and we use the automatic checkouts. Yes, there will be an awful lot of work and maybe some roles that might change, but it's just a matter of us adding more value all the time. So I think it's definitely going to be better for good recruiters.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, just a reminder to everybody, there's still the Q&A function is open. There's also a question in the chat here. So are clients doing psychometric testing before interview now allowed? Mary, you might take that one.
Psychometric testing has always been used. You know, Myers-Briggs years ago filtered out what careers our schools should put us forward and recommend us for, and go onto our CAO forms. Certainly my school used it. So it is a form. I suppose it depends on what testing they're using, what one. If they're using it in their system, that's not your problem. So don't take on. But if they're obliging you to implement it, look at your data processing impact assessment, look at your data processing agreement, look at that workflow in order to engage with liability. I think what you see with both Michael and Sandra is then they have done that robust risk assessment. They're mindful all of the time. That's why I shook my head no vigorously when you said about your literacy, Sandra, because that's definitely not the case. What you see is someone who's robustly trying to implement and benefit from the efficiencies of AI, but look at where are the risks? What am I open to? What can I be liable for? Some of that, the likes of me can help you in looking at T's and C's, in putting back a formula of words to clients that says, that pushes this back. You want me to do psychometric testing and administer it on your behalf, then who's carrying the liability for choosing that model, for choosing that particular form of testing, and what it does and how it does, and that the clients know it. It's not being surreptitiously launched on clients or on candidates. Which brings me to the other side, is you also need a policy about candidates, how candidates can use AI. You know, I've had the whole scene of people being obliged to turn their camera to show me what they have on their screen, show all of those sort of things, because it may well be that they have a load of post-it notes, or they have ChatGPT giving them the answers to the question. And then when people arrive, they don't actually have the level of competence that they displayed in an interview. You need to somebody needs to meet people in reality, and you need to have a very clear code. And I am beginning to write it into contracts of employment now to say, if you have deployed AI, if you have reached the stage, and give AI declarations. And certainly for tendering, you as businesses now have to give AI declarations. And also in Claude, since the 2nd of August, if you deploy Claude, even to tidy up or proofread a document for you, it puts a stamp in that you can't get out of it, that says, so you may have generated the whole thing and you've just got to proofread it or to create a bibliography for you, or things like that. I'm doing a master's in this AI thing, and I get it to create the bibliography for me at the end of when I've done an assignment. It puts a stamp on it that to say you've used Claude to do this. And okay, I declare that to UCD when I'm sending in my assignment to say this is what I've used it for. But Claude is doing that now on anything. So if you send anything over to a client, they can test it to see if that Claude date stamp is there.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you there because that's something that we've encountered in Sigmar is, and I'm sure every agency has seen this somewhere. I did a call with somebody, a phone call, and I put a post on LinkedIn about it and it went bananas. Obviously, it's a hot topic because I was genuinely struck for the first time ever. There was a candidate there that I thought could have been using AI to answer the questions that I was asking them. And it was a telephone call, so I couldn't see them. And it was just not that I was mistrusting them as such, but I was just going, God, this is the first time it's hit my brain as going, what's going on here? And any recommendations of how, if you're in that situation or you're on a Teams call and you think a candidate may be using a live interview support from AI, how should agencies deal with that, Mary, in the moment? Obviously, having the policy there is really important that you can refer to. Yeah. What else would you recommend?
I'd have a declaration at the beginning of the interview to say you're not being AI supported on this, and just in a bit of the way we say, or if you ring up somewhere, you get, this call is being recorded for training and quality purposes. Say, we're just saying if you're using an AI tool at this moment, you're not supposed to, it's not allowed. It will disqualify you if we feel that the answers have been generated by AI, and we can deploy proving systems on that. So we're just advising you now at the beginning of this meeting and at the beginning of this interview that if you are deploying those tools or using them anyway, you need to switch them off.
Yeah.
And we get that people are nervous, and we get that all of that.
Yeah.
And everybody wants the best version of themselves. The problem is the best version of yourselves. I mean, AI, I can spot an AI generated document because it's too perfect. None of us are that perfect. None of us are that perfect.
Well, speak for yourself, Mary. But anyway,
I think that's where, sorry, Mike, I'd say that's where the judgment piece comes in as well, because we are using our judgment to discern whether they might be using AI or not. So with that person, maybe that makes you decide whether or not to send them to the candidate. And obviously it has to be documented, but your feeling on it is important there because you figured he wasn't, and then you could have the conversation and see if he was. The other thing that I thought was fascinating recently when I learned it a couple of months ago is that when we click the thumbs up or thumbs down button, that is automatically sending feedback. I didn't know that when I heard that a few months ago. So that might be something important for people to know. So you can turn off the toggles at the back to not share information. But when you click that thumbs up or thumbs down, you are actually giving them information back as well.
Yeah. Just really quickly, because I know we're running out of time now, we've got a question in the chat. There's one about CRM reviews, which isn't really the purview of this call. So if you're interested in tapping up Michael Lantry for information about CRM review, you're going to have to try and track him down. You'll find him on LinkedIn. But there is a question about AI disclaimers at the end of our email signatures, as well as in our privacy policy. Should we have that in there, Mary? Guys, what do you think?
I suppose it depends on what your objective is in putting in the disclaimer. Why do you want it? You can say we use AI, this is what we use, and put in a disclaimer like that says this is the purposes or the extent and scope of which AI is deployed within our business. But then it starts becoming very weighty. I'd rather link it to the privacy policy, and everything is in the privacy policy that declares and is open, and then that you also have a log of the implementation of that privacy policy. It's not okay to have nice paperwork and shiny, links. You've got to actually be able to prove that you're implementing it. And over the last year, there've been a lot of very tricky, particularly around marketing, a lot of very tricky investigations coming from the DPC of agencies and outside of the industry in ways that were really surprising before. And I think AI is throwing up For candidates, for clients, it's showing up for general people. It's informing them on whether their GDPR has been infringed. So make sure that you're implementing the privacy policy, but there shouldn't be a separate disclaimer, not really necessary if your privacy policy is adequate.
Okay. And I think might be the last question we've got time for. And again, interesting to see if Sandra or Michael has experienced this, but how can you tell if somebody is using AI tools to answer interview questions? Michael,
Yeah.
have you had that experience, or have you come across that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess suspecting that people are, and certainly got feedback from clients that somebody seems to be, and they can tell if someone's kind of looking over here at another screen, or the
Yeah.
time or cadence of their answers.
Yeah.
So and the reality is, if you create that suspicion, you're probably not going to get the job. So you can't be absolutely prescriptive of how a candidate's going to behave. But certainly calling out if you have a suspicion that something is happening, I think that's important. I think, one observation that I've made certainly over the recent times is that every CV now is immaculate. So the CV is less trustworthy. So the screening call that we have is more important to understand. And even further, I would push that, the more that we're meeting people in person, they can't use AI. So it comes back to how do we, as recruiters, ensure that the service offering that clients are paying us for is creating value for that client. And the more time and energy we can put into face-to-face interactions, ultimately, the better, ironically, considering we're talking about technology all the time.
Yeah. Sandra, before I go to Mary to finish this one, have you experienced this
I
suspicion?
haven't really. I think
No.
so my jobs would be, I do very low volume and very senior work. So it's probably, maybe people are too old to use too much AI, but I haven't seen it. But I think again, it goes back to the judgment piece. And as Michael said, we should be meeting people, as much as we possibly can and making them more comfortable. And then we get to know them better and we can represent them better. So I think that works on both sides of the table. So much as we will use AI to make life easier and make things faster, it still comes down to, shaking hands and knowing people and doing that on both sides of the table.
Absolutely. Mary, just to finish this off, in terms of being able to identify if somebody is using AI tools to answer an interview question, again, any advice for us there?
I suppose it comes back down to your own gut instinct and following through on your own gut instinct. If you've recruited for very senior roles or specific roles, or you have recruiters who have vast experience in exercising their own judgment, they will get a gut feeling in a reaction to someone to go, that's too right, or it's too perfect, or they're using terminology that is just not normal for everyday use, even teenagers. That isn't normal. You'll start detecting things like that, and that's where this business. A lot of what we do, a lot of what in recruitment, a lot can be automated, can be supported. You can have that augmentation, but exactly what Sandra has said there, that piece of the human being and that human judgment, you've got to ensure that the next line are getting the experience to develop that judgment, and that it is being deployed. And I think that's your best safeguard against candidates faking they're putting their best foot forward. And there's a difference between putting your best foot forward and actually faking your position for a role or your experience, and doing that in a way that is basically lying.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to leave it there for today. A huge thank you to Mary Seery Kearney, Sandra Quinn, Michael Lantry as well. And just a final thank you to our brilliant sponsors, Contracting Plus. If you are working with professional contractors, make sure you're chatting to the team about how they can support you and have them on your partner list for umbrella and limited companies. If you've any other questions, please fire them into the ERF. Like Sandra, Michael and Mary have said, the ERF have huge supports available to everybody to help navigate some of these difficult waters. So don't be afraid to shout out and ask for help. So thanks very much for your time today, guys. Have a good one.
Bye now.